Hi, stitching friends. I'm Amy. I am the Globetrotting Stitcher. And thank you so much for coming to spend time with us today. If you are just finding us for the first time, welcome. I hope that you will stick around and I hope that you enjoy what we're doing here. And if you are a returning friend and viewer, welcome back. Thank you so much for coming to spend time with us today. We really do appreciate it. Today is Sunday, January the 16th. And we are having a very foggy weekend here in the Pacific Northwest. It's actually been a couple of days of pretty heavy fog, which is a little bit unusual for us, but I'm enjoying it. I think fog is one of those weather phenomena that just kind of sets a mood, and it's very mysterious. But I just think it's a lot of fun. So we'll enjoy it while it lasts. We don't have a whole lot to report today. I think it's probably going to be a fairly quick update. So yeah, there's just, it's kind of like the January, I think we all know that post-holiday kind of blah, kind of January feeling. And so things are pretty quiet and yeah, not a lot going on. So that's what that is. So we'll just hop right in really quickly then to show you, I had an FFO and something that I'm really excited to share with you. So last year I stitched, so a couple of years ago I had stitched, there's a chart by Blackbird Designs. It's a little booklet called Easter Parade and it has two charts in it. The main chart is an Easter bunny. And then the second smaller chart is a little spring Easter basket. It's really pretty. And I had stitched that last year and it's been kind of waiting around to be finished off. And so I found some time in the last couple of weeks to do that finishing. And I decided to turn it into a pillow. And so this is how it turned out. I stitched this on 36 count in the pink linen by R&R Reproductions, and I used almost all the called for flosses. I think I had to sub a couple of things out. So I'm like mostly pleased with how this turned out, and I'll explain why I say that. I love the overall style that I ended up going with as far as the finishing style, what I chose to do, the fabrics, all of that. But when I actually stitched it all together, I gave myself too generous of a seam allowance. I don't know what I was thinking. And I think what I should say is that when I stitched this together, I had been working on it all day long because I have a tendency to overcomplicate things. And so instead of just doing like a pretty simple pillow finish, I've got to do like 4 layers. And so for instance, you can see here, I've got this really pretty layer of this like vintage green stripy fabric. And then on top of that, this really pretty layer of like this kind of plum maroon reproduction vintage kind of fabric, which I love because if you can see the star print that's in here, it nicely mimics all of the eyelet stitches in the actual cross stitch piece. So I did layers like that. And then I chose to add this layer of kind of vintagey lace with a satin ribbon on top of that, and then added this little pearl button. So I love all of that, but of course doing that kind of work, you're building up layer by layer and it's kind of fussy work. And so that all took a while. And then here's the back. I chose another like a coordinating vintage kind of plummy mauve fabric with again the layers of the vintage lace with the satin ribbon and then another pearl button. So I love how that came together. I love how it turned out. I felt like it really matched up beautifully with the feel. When I was picking fabrics for this, I really wanted, this just has sort of this kind of muted vintagey kind of just old-timey feel to it. And I really wanted to pick up on that in the design of my pillow and the coordinating fabrics. And when I looked at my stash of fabrics, I had some where the colors worked nicely with it, but it just didn't kind of evoke that feel. And so it took me a while. I went to a couple different places before I found fabrics that I felt like really worked for what I wanted, and then kind of played with the different pieces to kind of bring it together. So the design of the pillow I love. What had happened though is that because it took me a while to just put all the pieces and build all the layers up, I'd been working on this thing like almost a full day by the time I got to the point where I was ready to sew the top section to the bottom section. And I think I was just tired and I was not thinking, and I gave myself far too much of the seam allowance. And so what ended up happening, you can see, is that while I didn't stitch over the top of any of the cross stitch stitching, there's not enough of a margin. And so it kind of, you lose a little bit of that effect rather than seeing kind of the full basket and design, kind of the margins of that start to disappear. So that was a little bit disappointing. It's still really cute. I still really love it. I wish that I had put that off for another day when my mind was fresh and I was thinking properly about how much of a seam allowance I actually needed. And I thought about, well, I could just go ahead and kind of rip that out and re-sew it with a smaller seam allowance. But I had already trimmed the corners on the inside and I trimmed pretty aggressively. And so there was no way I was going to have enough to kind of do that with a smaller seam allowance. So it's a lesson learned for next time. I wish that I didn't, wish it hadn't happened that way, but that's okay. I will say when I was working on this and when I saw kind of how it came out in my results, I had several moments where I was like, I wish I lived in the UK because I would have totally sent this to Lynn for finishing. Those of you who watch Lynn, the Lancashire Stitcher, know that she started her own finishing business. I think it was last year, might have been the year before, but I think it was last year when she started her own finishing business. And I have seen a number of pieces that she's finished for, if you watch Alba Stitcher, Amanda has sent her like a bunch of little stockings and some other things to do finishes on. And Lynn's work is absolutely beautiful. And if I lived in the UK, I would send her a bunch of things to finish for me because she does beautiful work. So if you're not familiar with Lynn's service, you should check it out. You should also check out her channel because she does beautiful work. But yes, when I saw how this turned out, I was like, man, I wish I lived close to Lynn. I would just send this to her and she could make it perfect. So, oh well, sometimes that's how things go. But at any rate, overall, I'm happy with this. I'm enjoying having it out. It's not spring yet, but I've kind of, the colors work, and so I've kind of plugged it into my Valentine's decor, and I'm enjoying it. And I've definitely learned a lesson that I will keep in mind for my next pillow. So that is my finish on my Easter Parade Easter Basket by Blackbird Designs. Okay, let's see. So that's it for finishes. So let's move on to whips. I only have a couple whips to show you today, and part of that is because, once again, my poor travel stitching has been very neglected, and I think I touched it once, and I put in so few stitches that you wouldn't even really notice the difference. So no travel stitching to show you today, and we don't have anything to show you as far as an update on Gary's Captain America piece because he has been working on some other projects, and so he's not been doing much in the way of stitching on that.
No, I have not. Instead, I've been working on a model and other stuff. But the model I'm working on is it's a Da Vinci model, and this is not done. It's the model. It's not done, but it has moving parts. I think when this is done, the wings will flap. But anyway, I had to stain all of this, even the little bits. And I'm not a cross stitcher. I'm a model builder.
He keeps saying that, but
I can be both.
There you go.
Anyway,
you're multi-craftual.
That's what I was doing and other stuff. So no, I did not finish the page I said I would finish. I think I put in like 2 lines. Not worth showing you.
That's okay. That's okay. You'll get back to it when you get back to it. And the point is you're enjoying what you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the 2 whips that we do have to show you today are both mine. And the first one is my sampler. I am working on the Floralia sampler by Chloe Me Designs. I am stitching this on a piece of 36 count Aqua Edinburgh linen. And the design does call for it to be stitched in a monochromatic palette, which I'm doing, but I'm stitching it in a teal colorway rather than red. So I'm using DMC 3808. The last time you saw this, I was getting really close to finishing page 3. I had done the top border of page 3, and I had started stitching, I think I had actually stitched all of, there's like a floral circle or a leaf border circle around a letter. And so I had stitched all of that. And so this last time I was still on vacation, my holiday break when I was working on this. So I got to make a lot of extra progress and I'm really pleased with how far I got. So this is where it is now. We're going to need a bigger backboard for this thing to be able to show it all off. This backboard isn't big enough. This is a big girl. Okay, so here's where we are right now. As you can see, I completely finished all of page 3. So I am I'm more than 50% done with this design right now. This last time I stitched it, I finished stitching the letter M in this, this leaf wreath. I stitched this entire border along the side here, which was an undertaking. But I'm really glad because I now have 2 of the borders fully finished. And of course, this one is halfway done, so I'm making good progress on getting those borders done. I stitched a bunch of these little motifs in here. I stitched this kind of floral spray up in the corner, the letter G. And then I came down on page 6 and I stitched some more of these little kind of mini motifs as well as the letter R. And then I got to work on this, this lovely maiden here. She's the largest motif in the design and she's carrying a basket of flowers. And she is a beefy, chunky part of this design just because she's so much stitching. So I was really happy to kind of get down quite a bit of that first part of her done. She's still got a lot of stitching to go, but I've got a good start on her. One of the things that has made me laugh quite a bit as I've been working on her is, and I know it's just looks this way because of where I am and how much I've stitched of her. But when I look at her, it looks like she's been really faithful to her CrossFit routine because it looks like she's got like a 6-pack of abs here. And again, I don't know if that's part of the design of like her dress where she's got gathers at the waist or if that's part of
her back.
It's not her back. She's been working out. Anyway, that made me laugh every time I looked at it. I also did go over and started putting in some stitches on page 4 over here. So I stitched the N, this floral spray, and then I started stitching this large, it's a floral, like flowers and leaves wreath, and I'll have my initials in that. So I've only got a couple of the bigger motifs left to finish on this design, and then it'll be mostly small to medium-sized motifs, which is really exciting because it feels like, although it's gonna take a couple more months to finish this off, it does feel like I've really kind of tipped over to the side of I've got the good momentum, and this one is really gonna see some good progress and get to a finish in the next few months. So that's exciting. And I've been starting to think about where it should live after it's finished. So we'll see what we come up with for that. But at any rate, this is my Floralia sampler, and I'm really pleased with how it's coming along. Okay. And the last whip I have to show you is my progress on Royal Holiday. This is my fancy lady, and it is a Mirabilia design that I am stitching on a piece of 32 count Laurel linen. This design is a stitch along that I started actually a year ago now with Sarah the Stitch Addict on Instagram. Our hashtag is USNZ Royal Holiday Sal. Anyone is welcome to join, and it's been really fun because we've had quite a few folks join. So midway through last year, Lynn the Lancashire Stitcher joined us. She's just making, like, that woman's needles are on fire. Every time I see her progress, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's catching up to us so quickly. And Sarah, the Stitch Addict, she's also made phenomenal progress. I think she's closing in on a finish. But we've also had some folks join us recently, including Nancy Duquette, the Scottish Stitcher, and Andreas Schweikart. All of them are on Instagram. So check out the hashtag, check out their progress, cheer them on. It's been really fun. But I've been working on this last week, and the last time you saw it, I was getting fairly close to the point. I was closing in on the point where I was going to finish the stitching on the skirt of the gown. I had made more progress on where the cloak pools at the front, at the woman's feet, and then where it kind of wraps around her. And this time, I'm really excited to show you where I am because I think I've made really good progress. This is where she is now. So as you can see, I've put in a lot more stitching up here. These ribbons are really starting to get long. You can see where the white furry part of her cloak is really wrapping around. I have finished all of the stitching in the skirt, so her gown is completely done. The only thing that's left to stitch on her is this section of cloak. And you're starting to see now where the cloak pools at her feet here. You kind of, you're getting the effect of like the ripples of the fabric as they pool on the floor, which is kind of a cool effect. I really like that. So I'm really, really pleased with how this is coming along. It's so, so beautiful. And one of the things I did want to point out as far as how I'm working on this, if you've been following my progress on this for a while, you know that on my big fancy ladies and on my full coverage pieces, I tend to stitch in diagonals. And what you'll notice is though you still have a little bit of a diagonal effect, it's not a clear diagonal line anymore. You also know that I use parking, and as you can see, I only have a handful of parked threads on here. One of the things that I decided as I was working on this over the last week was I wanted to kind of modify my approach a bit. And I think so if you've been watching my channel for a while and watching my progress on this, you know that it has been a bit of a slog for me. It's been, the fact that I love this design as much as I do is what's kept me going on it, because it feels so often like I'll put in a week of work on it and I feel like I can hardly see the progress. And I think that is a result of me working in diagonals the way I do, because what happens is that I'll work in this really thin line of the piece, and I may put in a couple thousand stitches, but because it's just concentrated in this one thin line, you really don't get the impact of how many stitches you've put in as you would if you were working in like a chunk of a section. And so what I kind of decided to do was change it up a little. I'm still working in diagonals because I like the focus that brings to my work. It helps me make sure that I'm not missing any stitches. But while I'm working in the diagonal, what I'm doing is I'll pick up a thread, I'll work it down as far as I can or all the way through that diagonal. And then rather than parking it in the next diagonal where I would park it, I'll just continue the stitching until that thread runs out. And then I'll go back to the diagonal, I'll pick up the next place where I need to start a new thread and do the same thing. And what it's doing is it's getting me through the diagonals, but it's actually carrying me over sometimes 2 and 3 and 4 diagonals farther than I would have gotten. And so you get the sense of more progress. And it also feels like I finished diagonals more quickly because chunks of those are already done. So I think I might try this more modified approach going forward, at least on my fancy ladies, because while I did make more progress than normal on this over this past week, I think this approach also really showcases the progress I made in a way that you wouldn't have seen if I was just sticking strictly to those narrow, very restrictive diagonals. So at any rate, that's how I kind of changed my approach on this. I'm really enjoying it. I'm so excited to be getting close to a finish on it. And yeah, I was telling Gary yesterday, I was like, I'm just ready to be done with this one. I love it, but I'm ready to be done. I'm ready to move on to something else. So that's Royal Holiday by Mirabilia. Okay, before we close up for the day, I've got a couple of questions that I want to answer that came in on recent videos. So the first one came from Sandy Koenig, and she said, when showing your Royal Holiday by Mirabilia, I noticed 2 pins on your needle minder. How are those being used? Great question, Sandy. I am using those in a couple of ways. I'm using them as counting pins, essentially, and I find counting pins to be really helpful for avoiding mistakes. So a lot of times I will use them rather than my needle that I have the thread on to just count my stitches over. If I'm counting more than 5, 6, 7 stitches over, particularly if I'm counting more than 10 stitches, I find it really useful to use counting pins. You count your 10 stitches, you mark it with a pin, and then you count from there. And so it's great for like marking points in the fabric or just kind of more accurate counting. So that's one way I use them. Another way that I've tended to use them a lot is to triangulate stitches rather than counting. And so to use this, to use my Mirabilia as an example, when I'm stitching in a diagonal, this is actually a great section. So let's say I was going to be doing a stitch, starting a new color right in this like section right in here. What I could do with my counting pin is I could look at my chart and say, okay, this stitch up here and this stitch over here, I can use to triangulate the position of my new stitch just by following the lines with those counting pins and then marking the spot. I still will usually also count as a backup just to make sure I'm getting the right spot. But I find that kind of that triangulating process using the pins to follow the lines of the thread, it just kind of cuts down on time for me and it makes it a little bit easier and it helps with my accuracy. So
that's only 2 angles, right? A triangle has 3 sides.
Yes, you're
sorry.
Nope, that's right. But it may not be the right word, but that's how I'm going to use it.
Well, in terms of navigation,
yes.
Triangulation, that's not it. What you just did.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Well, somebody might be out at sea one day.
They might. They might indeed.
Now we have to show them how to really triangulate.
Now we do. Never argue triangulation with a Navy man. So anyway, Sandy, I hope that answers your question. Next question came from Christiane Bramble. And she said, what is a continental stitch? I'm very new to cross stitching and most channels I've watched don't seem to think of continental stitching as being the best of stitches to use. However, you mentioned you use it in your big project. What's the purpose and why isn't it recommended? This is such a great question. I'm so glad you asked. First of all, because when I stopped to think about it, I realized I need to stop saying that I'm using the continental stitch when I talk about rose trellisin, because I actually stopped using that well over a year ago. And I stopped using it for the very reasons that other people tend not to recommend it. So I will try to explain. The continental stitch is sort of like a reverse half stitch. And I will include a link to some diagrams in the description box below, because if you're more of a visual person, those diagrams might be helpful to illustrate what I'm trying to explain with words here. But if you are stitching with a half stitch and you're like me, I stitch from left to right. So if I'm stitching half stitches, I'll start in the bottom left. My stitch comes up in the bottom left corner, goes down in the top left, up in the bottom left, down in the top left. The continental stitch just reverses that, where you would come up in the top right and go down in the bottom left, and so on. It also tends to work from, I'm not sure about the working left or right part of it. The reason why I know that's probably confusing. The reason why continental stitch and even half stitch can be a problem, particularly if that's all you're using in a design. When you do a cross stitch, what happens is your stitches come from 2 different sides. And so it creates an even pull on the fabric from both sides of the stitch. When you do just a half stitch or just a continental stitch, it's only pulling the fabric in one direction. And so what it can do, particularly on a full coverage piece where you've got really dense stitching, is it can pull the fabric out of alignment or it can create a, what's the word? It makes it wonky. That's not the word I'm looking for. Warp. Thank you. It warps the fabric. And that's actually why I am no longer using the continental stitch, because my first row of pages on Rose Trellisin were badly warped because I was only getting that pull in the one direction. And so I've had to use a modified approach to my stitching to create even pull on to create an even pull on the fabric so that it's not warping. And it's slowly correcting over time. I don't think I'll ever get the warp fully out, even with blocking, but that's why. So hopefully that's clear. But that's why it's not recommended. That's why I stopped using it. And I thought that was a really, really great question. Okay, so let's wrap up quickly. I'm going to talk about what we're going to be working on the next couple of weeks. I am going to hopefully get back to my travel stitching, which is Silent Night by Country Cottage Needleworks. That's been so neglected lately. And I'm thinking the next couple weeks, looking at my calendar, I think I will have a chance to get some time on that. So fingers crossed. I am also going to spend a week working on my full coverage, which is Rose Trellis In. I'm really looking forward to getting back to that. And hoping to see if the person in the window actually starts to show up in a way that you can tell it's a person. And finally, I'm going to have a new start in my seasonal stitching category. I am pulling out one of my PDF charts that has been in my stash for a bit, and I really am excited to get going on it. This is from a designer I don't hear a lot of folks talking about, and that is Couleur de Toile. The chart is called Par une nuit enchantée. My apologies to the people of France for butchering your beautiful language. My pronunciation, I'm sure, is terrible. I know that translates to On an Enchanted Evening, and it's a beautiful, almost monochromatic woodland nighttime design with a bunch of woodland creatures in a white sleigh. It's really beautiful, and I've been wanting to stitch it for a long time, so I'm excited to get going on that. We will also see what happens with Gary, whether he is continuing to be busy with other projects or has some time for Captain America. So we'll see. So that's what we will be up to over the next couple of weeks. So I think that kind of does it for us today. We hope that you are all doing well. We hope that if you are in the Northern Hemisphere and you're experiencing, no matter where you are, if you're experiencing like the January blahs with the holidays all being over, we hope that you're finding lots of time for stitching and that you're enjoying the peace and quiet. If you like our videos, please do give us a thumbs up and subscribe. We'd love to have you come back and spend time with us every week. We enjoy reading all of your comments and we try to respond as often as possible. We do read them all. We just don't always have an opportunity to actually respond with a comment. You are welcome to follow me on Instagram to see updates between videos on my progress. I am globetrotting_stitcher, and feel free to send me an email at globetrottingstitcher@gmail.com. Also you can hit the little bell. There's a little bell on YouTube, and if you want notifications when we post a new video, you can hit the bell and YouTube will let you know when we put something new up. So be well, be safe. Enjoy your stitching, and we will look forward to seeing you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.